Good morning, and welcome to the beginning of Holy Week. In the next 5 days, I am pleased that you will be joining me as we look at the last week, a day-by-day account of Jesus' final weeks in Jerusalem, according to the Gospel of Mark. Each day I will have a scripture reading, a short reflection based on some thoughts from the book by Borg and Crossan, and I will relate it to our world today. I will include perhaps some music, a prayer, or a spiritual practice. Today is Monday. We've just participated in Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, waving palm branches and shouting hosannas. But today is a different story. Our scripture reading is from Mark 11:15 to 18. It takes place early the next morning. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those that were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. And he would not allow anyone carrying merchandise through the temple courts. As he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this, and they began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teachings. This passage of scripture is often dismissed as Jesus' temple tantrum, and it's been greatly misunderstood. It's sometimes been used as a criticism against the ancient Jewish custom of blood sacrifices, or a criticism against the priesthood, or even a criticism against Judaism in general. But what is this passage really about? To understand this, we need to look back into the Old Testament. Just like Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on a donkey was a fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy, his actions in the temple is also a fulfillment of the prophecy in Jeremiah 7. In this scripture, Jeremiah warns against God's house becoming a den of robbers and threatens that God will destroy his house if this persists. A den of robbers. What is meant by this phrase? It's not an accusation that everyone in the temple are thieves, but it is a reference to the fact that they are more obsessed with the rituals of worship than they are about God's justice. The temple has become a place to hide and to conceal those that do not live out God's justice. Again and again in the Old Testament, we can read examples of where God says, "I reject your worship because of your lack of justice." But we never read anywhere God saying, "I reject your justice because of your lack of worship." Worshipping God is never a substitute for living God's justice. So when Jesus enters the temple and drives out the buyers and the sellers, overturns the money changers' tables, overturns the seats of the dove sellers, and stops anyone from carrying anything through the temple, Jesus is shutting down the temple for worship. It's a symbolic action of destruction. Jesus is fulfilling the prophecy that God will destroy the temple if worship becomes a substitute for justice. In our current global pandemic, our churches have also been shut down. Our ministries continue, but we are no longer able to worship in the same way, in our beautiful sanctuaries, sitting in our pews, full of rituals and symbols. Perhaps sometimes we have become too concerned with these traditions. Perhaps sometimes we are guilty of wanting to be seen in the temple worshiping rather than concerned about how we are living God's justice. Perhaps our worship routines need sometimes to be overturned. perhaps it is time for us to rethink about how we live out God's love for justice and a prayer for all nations. So I invite you to take a moment now to close your eyes and to pause. Focus not on your own concerns and needs. Think about what you can do to live ways that live God's God's life of justice, truth, and love. And in the silence of your hearts, ask God to overturn the ways in which you might have put traditions of worship before the call to justice. We are in a pandemic crisis. It is an overturning of tables, but it is also an opportunity to rethink how we live. As we end, I invite you to join with me in prayerfully singing 3 times through More Voices 13. The words are, "For we want justice, truth, and love, my God. We want justice, truth, and love." Join with me in singing, or take the time to prayerfully reflect how you live out God's justice.
For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love. For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love. For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love. For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love. For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love. For we want justice and truth and love, my God. We want justice and truth and love.
Amen.